the updates on the US and the Paris Agreement, we know that countries have their nationally determined contributions, so the NDCs are sort of objectives for countries, objectives in a multilateral set for countries or private sectors who want to invest in countries. They need to be known, the NDCs, countries need to be clear with the projects that they want, and that's the only way that you can secure financing. FC, EBRD, EIB, all of these international partners are ready to finance private sector in the energy transition.
It seems to be the buzzword, and various investments coming into that sector. Green steel. So I think, at least from India's context, is to set the policy straight. Yes, there are some subsidies required, but it's not over and beyond the physical challenges that any state or the federal government would have. That's one part. But the second part again is, how do you make this the transition political resistant or resistant to politics, right? And that's going to be very, very important. So the way we look at it is, how can we sell it to our electorate? And as a HRD minister, my focus is, how do I create the next set of jobs that we don't even know in exactly which area they're going to come. So working with the industry, working with NGOs, collaborating with them, getting the curriculum, the whole 9 yards, and creating the next wave of jobs, I think is going to be very, very important to make it more resistant.
Thank you so much. I'm being mindful of time, and I'll request one piece, which is this is a conversation. So, if we could have one question, thought, insight from participants. I know there's people in the back as well. We'd welcome that before we shift on to the next conversations.
So basically, as we discussed, lots of the focus on mitigation globally as well as in India, and the resources, particularly financial resources allocated for the adaptation, are very less. At the same time, communities are facing lots of challenges because of the climate change, and not only this issue is related to just transition, but issues very bigger. Because of the climate change, lots of people are migrating from one place to another place. And as far as India is concerned, we have about 200 million migrant workers, and many of them migrating because of the climate change. So how we can link the communities also, and basically how we can broadening the just transition definition in that context.
Thank you. I know you had your hand up too. Do you want to just 30 seconds shortly share?
Yeah, well, I would have one question towards you. I found it very interesting when you were saying creating the new job opportunities, which I think is great and is needed. I'd like to go on the topic of the next generations. We have a massive swift, between the generations that are currently in the power positions and the ones that are coming. And I'll be very honest with you. I am one from these generations. We don't believe many things that are said because it's very often the same thing. It's said. How you're going to tackle this problem of transparency and trust that is really existing towards all of these promises and all of these COPs and WEFs and etc. It's nice, but yeah, we don't see the results. I'm sorry. Don't want to be rude here, but yeah, I'd be interested in that.
I think that's a valid question. Before I come to you, I think the way we're looking at it as a state is, how do you incentivize farmers? How do you incentivize households? So can I have a power purchase agreement with them? So whatever energy they don't use, we end up paying that. So under the Honorable Prime Minister's program, Suryaghar, which is rooftop solar for every house, that's the exact PPA, power purchase agreement we're doing with every citizen. And I think that's one of the simple mechanisms that we can create the incentive structure for greater adoption. To be fair, India has seen a rise in energy costs, and for every country to really become a developed nation, low cost of energy is going to be critical. So between solar, wind and pump storage, hydro, as of today, I don't know PSPA where it will be in the next 5 years, currently is viable. So at about 4 and 5 rupees a unit in Indian rupees, it actually makes sense. So I think tying the entire incentive structure, I think is going to be very, very critical in that sense. Coming to your point, yes, I think a lot of tall promises have been made. The Honourable Minister has also made very clear in the opening remarks. But I think time has come. I mean, look at what's outside. This is probably the greenest Davos that we have seen. It doesn't feel like Davos. Last night, that's the whole discussion we were having. Things are changing. So we have to adapt to it. Otherwise, we will have tougher challenges. And if you look at natural calamities, it is going up. And insurance companies are running out of money. So we have to translate. So I think politicians are to be partially blamed for it, not creating the vibrant ecosystem to enable it. So for me, what's exciting is mind to energy, and capturing the entire value of the ecosystem and understanding the role of human resource development, the role of real-time governance in the entire ecosystem. That I believe can enable India to leapfrog as a nation. Because we don't have a lot of the legacy issues that other countries have. So we never went through a personal computing phase. We just went to the smartphone phase. So I think this, even in energy, there's potential to leapfrog. Our grids can be far more robust. And Government of India mindfully is spending substantial amount of money building the entire grid connectivity. And so I think that should solve both sides of the coin, if I may.
I just want to say that adaptation is on the agenda. And for example, one of the outcomes of also COP27 was the Loss and Damage Fund, realizing that desertification and what's happening, because that's in sub-Saharan Africa mainly. But one important aspect is dialogue among countries and also showing success cases where adaptation was taken as a focus, and there were alternative financing tools, like what's happening in Colombia in terms of debt swap agreements, Barbados, the same. So we need to shed light in discussions on what worked, and not just what worked, how did it work? So that can also provide politicians with, in other areas, in other countries, with concrete examples that it's not just a promise, but it has happened elsewhere. What do I need to do to make sure that I can do the same and replicate and scale? So this word scaling we always hear about, is to take a successful example and see how we can. Of course, not one size fits all, but the problems are the same, and when one solution works, why not try to replicate given the initial conditions in the country? In terms of trust, I think that's well said, and it's everywhere. And I think the shocks that are facing us today are more frequent and bigger, and whether it's the fiscal space that is available for countries to be able to take action, which shock should I prioritize given the fiscal, the very tight fiscal space. So it's I mean, the credibility gap that exists can only be narrowed through better communication, and I think that's an element which there's always areas of improvement. There's no best communication. There's always scope to improve the communication. I think social media plays a very big role, and being mindful to the different generations is also important, and including them in the dialogues. I think for COP, there's also the youth dialogue at the COP level, and the different initiatives related to startups and SMEs in the climate space for adaptation. In Egypt, for instance, we have farmers today that are using solar panels to, instead of diesel, for using the water for agriculture. That's a very important example of action for adaptation. And sometimes they're provided with loans at low cost and so forth. So it's communication is very important, shedding light on what works and being very honest on what doesn't work and what we cannot do.
Great. On that note, thank you so much. This was deeply insightful. After yesterday, I think the one thing I do take away is the commitment towards energy transition remains strong. And while there are turbulent times coming up, I'm pretty confident that we'll be okay. That being said, we'll close the session on government perspectives. And Vikas actually moved to you to have a discussion on the private sector perspective of what does energy transition.
Thank you, Ritvika. Thank you so much. You stole a bit of my thunder in terms of how I was going to introduce this, but thank you. Morning, everyone. Thank you for making it today to this session. My name is Vikas Mehta. I am the Executive Director of SED Fund. SED Fund is a venture and a philanthropy fund focused on renewable energy, and we're based in the Netherlands. We have with us two folks representing the renewable energy companies. The first one on further left, I have Vaishali Nigam Sinha. She's a Chief Sustainability Officer and co-founder of Renew Power, which is one of India's largest RE developers. And on my left, we have Park Arshad, who is the President and Director of Indica Renewables, a diversified renewable energy company in Indonesia. So Vaishali, if I can come to you first and straight away jump to the question, which is that we heard from Lokesh and Dr. Rania about the government perspective on what they're doing for the policy for their states and for the countries that they represent. But I just want to understand from your perspective at Renew Power that how do you see the policy environment in India, whether it's at the federal or the central level or the state level, specifically with regards to the pace and scale of RE growth?
Thanks so much, and congratulations on this event. I think it's a very well orchestrated conversation. I want to start by saying that, a question was asked on, we hear a lot of these conversations at COP and Davos, but what's happening on the ground? I must say, you must come to India and see what's going on, because, we've been in India I was born there, but the business started about 13, 14 years ago. I think it's been a parallel journey with India's renewable energy growth. And I think when you have a leader with a vision, and leaders, if I could say, even in the state of Andhra Pradesh, just within months of coming into power, I must congratulate the government for coming up with a robust, integrated plan for renewables, green hydrogen, which really sends a messaging. We're talking about a messaging in the United States of pulling out, but then it's 1 out of 200 countries who are still there. And so the 199 countries, if they don't follow, you need followers to have leaders, right? So let's not make leaders who must not be leaders in this climate journey. And in the first stint of President Trump, we saw that the world continued like what? And we are in a much better space. So sometimes I do feel it's important for us to step back and take stock of where we are, what we've accomplished. And in India, if I look at a decade, the renewable deployment on the ground has grown by six times. In 2014-15, we had about 13 gigawatts of assets on the ground. We have 200 gigawatts. In 2019, we were at around 50, but now we're going to do 50 gigawatts year on year. So that is the kind of progress we see. And why has that happened? That's happened, if I could come back, we have a vision, we have a commitment to the sector. We have the desire to engage with the world in a positive way. I think that by the International Solar Alliance, by the ambitious commitments of the COP, all of this is really important for us in the private sector, because when our government representatives come back, it's very easy to have a conversation on the gaps which exist for us to accelerate the pace on the ground. So I feel that I'm optimistic, I'm hopeful, and I'm positive just because of what I see happening in my own country. We have the largest grid, as you mentioned, which really is a game changer. We have SECI, which is a nodal agency, which sort of increases transparency and increases our ability to deploy in a more transparent way, to increase efficiency in the deployment, and so on and so forth. So at an institutional level, I see in India, there's a huge amount of progress and commitment which has happened. When we started Renew, the company I represent, we had knocked about 60 doors in 2011, 60 investors globally. And we had one investor who invested in our story, because people were like, oh, wind turbines, high net worth individual investment destination, what are they going to do? But now we have a business model for solar, wind, hydro, pumped hydro, and a lot of innovation around how we can leverage these individual sources of clean energy and innovate in a complex way to look at round-the-clock generation, etc., etc. So I'm not sure if this gives you a sense that at a central level there's a huge amount of commitment, and at the state level there's a huge amount of commitment by many, but not all. So the question is, how can we bring that? How can we work on that to ensure there is a central and a state level sort of alignment for us to do more, right? And as I said, the Andhra Pradesh government is doing a great job. and we look forward to working with many other states in the country. And then the alignment at the global level at these events is just a kind of a teaser for us to go back in our own countries, and when the government interacts with the private sector, and then we work with communities on the ground as well to make things happen. We probably see the positive change we've seen over the last decade in India.
Thank you, Vishali. Thank you so much. You know what, my selfish takeaways from what you just said are two, which is you mentioned the grid modernization and you mentioned the round-the-clock power. Two components which are absolutely essential when we talk about the integration of RE into the grid, and of course having, how do you tackle the intermittency of the grids themselves, of the RE itself. So it is great to see the commitment from not just the government, but also agencies like SETI and Renew Power, which have also been part of those round-the-clock bids. So thank you for that. Parkashav, if I can turn to you right now to give us a perspective from Indonesia. How have you seen the federal and the provincial policies shape up? Especially if I can ask you, since the announcement of the JETB 2 years ago, how have you really seen a company like Indica Renewables, which is very diversified in terms of its RE portfolio, how have you seen the policies in the country play out?
Thank you. Very good morning. So my name is Arshad Rashid. I'm the president of Indica Energy. It's an integrated energy company out of Indonesia. So now moving from India to Indonesia with the same eye. I would like to say I appreciate Nuswaniti for the event today. Indonesia, we have a commitment already that we want to have a net zero by the year 2050, and that's a commitment made by the previous government. But it is not only a commitment by the government, but actually of the people, because the businesses is also very supportive of these commitments. And we just had a election, and we have a new president, only 3 months in the jobs. So unlike Trump, I think he's still committed and consistent towards the green transition. So basically, for Indonesia itself, I mean, we still have a big challenge on the regulation itself. Although we are actually moving away from fossil fuels and really committed towards renewables. And in Indonesia, we have, of course, solar energy. We have the wind. We have also the hydro. We also have all the renewables that's available. I think in Indonesia we have it, all the resources. And it is actually a very good investment, because now the push from the government is very clear. How to make sure that at least 25% of our energy mix by the year, actually 2025, which is this year or next year, to be there. And this is a commitment really, it's a big push by the government. So we actually welcome a lot of investors to come to Indonesia. We still have a lot of cost challenges on between the central government and provincials. And this is where the commitment of the new government, of the presidents, how to align the regulatory from central also to the provincials. And this is a big job, because as a democratic country, sometimes the governor and the president comes from different political parties, and this becomes a very big issue. But I think in regards to this energy transitions, because it is being pushed by also the people, because we are experiencing a lot of climate change, we are experiencing a lot of the floods, talk about all the natural disasters that's happening, and people are starting to realize that this is something real. And this is where I think the power of the people pushing towards the government, and that will actually create this alignment between central and the provincial government. Still a lot of homework that we actually need to do. But now the level is not only within Indonesia. Now we are actually trying to connect all the electrical within ASEAN, which is Southeast Asia. And this ASEAN region with 10 countries, now we are actually already in discussion how to make sure to actually connect the grids. And this is important because usually where the sources of the energy and where the demands of the energy are far off. And this is where some countries do not have the possibility of creating renewables because of space. As an example, Singapore. Singapore is very small, but they want it also to have. And this is where the interconnectivity and how we work within ASEAN. Our new president, Prabowo Subianto, make it very clear that the green push, green energy, green industries, we call it 0-8, which is, in a way, 0 is 0% poverty and 8% economic growth. Sometimes very conflicting, but this is the way we want to make sure the poverty becoming 0, so that it's a just economic growth. And the push is for green energy, and also what we call, we'll have one of the largest green industries in the world. That's the goal that we have. Because and with ASEAN now, it's about 600 million people. So we have this health in Asia and also in the region. ASEAN will be.
Distinguished speakers, Leslie Johnston from the Lotus Foundation, and Priya Agarwal-Hebar, who is the chairperson at Hindustan Zinc. We are going to your work and your sector in bridging and providing that glue that is necessary for governments, for science, and for business to come together.
What tools do you have? And in fact, on Thursday, Ashif and others will be joining us to talk about how do you